Hello and welcome to this evening's webinar. I'm Tracy Steady Hardcastle, and with me this evening is Dr. Betty Murray, PhD, MS, IFMCP. She is the founder and CEO of the Minerva Project, a groundbreaking AI-powered platform and telemedicine service that personalizes menopause management by integrating symptoms, wearable data, and hormone metabolism with treatment all in all 50 states, which is remarkable. A functional medicine expert with over 20 years of experience, she previously founded Living Well Dallas Functional Medicine Center, one of the largest functional medicine practices in North Texas. Dr. Murray has appeared on Fox News, NBC, CBS, shared the stage with health leaders like Dr. Mark Hyman, and hosts the Menopause Mastery podcast. She also helps us out with webinars and with our She Summits and things like that all the time. So we have a bunch of her content on our platform that you can look at as well. So welcome, Dr. Murray. It's so nice to be here with you again.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
So we're here to talk about all things women's health tonight. And Dr. Murray is a wealth of knowledge on the subject, so I'm really excited for us to be diving into some cool things tonight. But first, I think we're going to go over the poll. So I hope that all of you have had a chance to take the poll while I was introducing Dr. Murray. Oh, and there's the poll. I love how it just magically appears in front of my eyes. Okay. So our first question is, how familiar are you with the concept of functional genomics, analyzing how your genes actually behave in daily life? So 38% of you actively use genetic insights in your health decisions. 27% of you have heard the term. 23% have tried a DNA test before, and 12% have never heard of it. So welcome. You're going to learn quite a bit about it tonight, I would imagine. Question number 2, which areas of women's health feel most relevant to you right now? 31% said improving gut health and digestion. 19% boosting energy and metabolism, 19% balancing hormones and mood, and tied for at 15% managing perimenopause or menopause and preventing long-term issues like fatigue, brain fog, or weight gain. Number 3, have you noticed any changes in your energy, sleep, or focus that you suspect are hormone related? 38% say somewhat, but I'm not sure what's causing them. 31% say yes, I've noticed clear changes. 19% not really, my energy feels stable. And 12% are not sure. Number 4, when it comes to menopause or hormonal transitions, what concerns you most? And it looks like 77% it's long-term health, heart, bone, or brain. 19% weight changes or bloating, only 4% hot flashes, night sweats, or sleep, and not a lot for mood and brain fog this evening. And number 5, if your DNA could reveal one thing about your body, what would you most want to understand? And 46% say my longevity and aging markers. 19% of you would like to know about your energy and stress resilience profiles. 27% how your gut and hormones interact. Well, that's exciting, Dr. Murray. And 8% how your genes affect your metabolism and weight. So thank you so much. So why don't you give us a sense of where you're all from this evening? Put in the chat where you're calling in from this evening. Boston. Oh, you're on the opposite side of the state from me. Wisconsin. Cats from DC. We've got Ireland, South Carolina. They all come in so quickly. More Boston, New Mexico, North Carolina. So all over the place. North Vancouver,
Australia.
Australia. Nice. See, we are a global company. So everybody here is representing that beautifully. Jenny's from Las Vegas. Excellent. So Dr. Murray, as we open up, what's the number one thing that you see in your practice that is confusing to people when it comes to hormonal health and genetics and how everything sort of shifts at this time of life?
I don't know if I could say it's one thing. I'd say, because you have kind of two different people. So we have the individuals here, that come to the DNA company trainings and webinars, many of which have maybe done their DNA 360. So you guys are like, you have advanced knowledge, right? So you have those with advanced knowledge. So I'm going to speak to the ones that aren't in this camp or maybe are new to this camp. What's really interesting is, 100% of women go through hormonal changes, right? We all go through our timeline in our life, and 100% of us will go through menopause. Nobody gets a pass, even if you feel like you didn't have or aren't having a lot of symptoms. You're still going through it, right? Symptoms are just part of it. And what was really shocking to me is they did a survey and they found that 60% of women that were highly symptomatic in different ways weren't sure that's what's happening. Right. So I think the biggest thing is there's so much confusion in women's health. And what does this mean? And conventional medicine sort of dismisses women's concerns. They go, oh, that's in your head. Right. So, I think I don't understand. I'm being told it's in my head, or I'm being told that there's no relationship, because medicine is sort of siloed. And then we have the individuals that often show up here or are more functionally minded or longevity minded. We have a lot of information, and it's understanding how much of that information is sort of a potential, like your genetics are potential for action, right? They're a blueprint of possibility, and that you largely have lifestyle, diet, nutrition things that are determinant. Right. So it's recognizing I can get more data so I can make more informed choices and more informed decisions to improve my health. And I think the hard part for somebody on this side of the fence is understanding how much is sort of at will or things that I have a lot of control over, and what sounds determinate. I don't know if you find that, but a lot of times it's like, oh my God, I have this, I can't do that. It's like, no. That's not necessarily true. Even in many cases, laboratory data and other things that come back, many things like diagnoses can often be dialed back with the right changes, the right activities, the right things. And I think sometimes the more the more you get like, this is determinate, this isn't, but now I don't know how to put it together. So that was a really long and drawn out answer, but I think it probably speaks to the different individuals that might be here tonight with us.
Absolutely, absolutely. Very well said. So I was thinking something we haven't done in a little while is see who has their test results with them and just having them come on and ask questions. So put a 1 in the chat if you have your DNA 360 results and you would just like a chance to just raise your hand and actually come on mic and ask one or both of us a question. Let's see what our audience has to say tonight. We're getting some 1s. I'm not surprised to see that. Some people are shy about coming on mic. You don't have to. You can still ask your question in the Q&A, but you do have to have your test in order to ask a genetic question. You can ask questions about other things related to hormones if you'd like, but we'd like to encourage those of you who have really specific DNA related questions to go ahead and get your tests, get the app. If you haven't downloaded the app, it makes it really easy to kind of flip back and forth between tests and see the information that you want to see. So, all right. So, the way that this will work is we're going to have you raise your hand using the little raise hand icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And then we'll start calling on you. We're going to get some help from the people in the back to manage it so that things don't get too crazy. So go ahead and raise your hand so that we know who to call on first. Well, while people are finding the
we're
right parts,
having a little bit of a technical issue. Dr. Steady, I apologize. Vanny, it's showing that Dr. Steady is not in the meeting and cannot receive messages. I see Corey has her hand up, so why don't you start with her, Doc, while we work on what's going on the backside.
Oh, okay. Well, that explains. I was like, how interesting. Okay. So one thing that I do want to say is that by coming on here and telling your stuff, telling everybody what's going on with your DNA, you are revealing that information about yourself on a recorded webinar. So just if you don't want to do that, then you might be better off just asking a question in the Q&A when we can just say your first name and not give any more revealing information about you. But Corey, you are our first person who gets to come on and ask a question.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I have, I believe, the optimal BDNF, but I also have it mixed with the other one that said that's the epistasis, because I have the GG on the TPH2 too. So, I mean, I just know that's what they said. So that's sort of a concern. So when I was writing notes one time on the BDNF, it said red light therapy increases BDNF. But since I'm already optimal, I know Cash has been saying you don't want to just biohack everything. And I don't want to be doing red light if it's a bad idea. So I didn't know which markers I should be looking at to see if it's okay if I do red light.
Dr. Murray, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
I mean, if you would like to go first, you could go first, and I'll chime in. I'm never without an opinion.
Okay. So what I would say is that if it's optimal, it doesn't mean that you can't use red light therapy. You don't want to. You can use it a couple times a week or a couple times a month or something like that. You don't have to be as rigid about never, as Dr. Murray was talking about when she was first talking, thinking always and never, right? Like it's not like I always have to do this or I never can do this. You can use it and it has other benefits on your body and on mitochondrial health and things like that. So that it's okay to do it. There's a difference between thinking of things in terms of biohacking and thinking of things in terms of, okay, way back when, we used to sit around the fire. And so we used to get some of this red light in our bodies. And we don't really do that anymore. I mean, some people have a fireplace, but thinking of it in terms of something that might feel nice and just be overall healthy without thinking, I need to do this for my BDNF. That's what I'm thinking.
So I shouldn't. This sounds weird too. It's like, because I have the worst one is for a lot of problems as far as clearance. I have breast cancer in my family. I've had 4 tumors removed. They were benign. Lots of breast cancer stuff. And I can't, you guys, am I still correct that you guys do not share the BRCA? Which, I mean, because I don't look at it like a lot of people, like if you have it, you're going to get it. It just means if you get it, your body can't fight it as easily if you have the BRCA. But do you guys share the BRCA or no?
We don't test for that.
Oh, you don't even test for that. Okay.
Correct.
Because see, I was thinking the red light might help the mitochondria, like as far as getting it going, as far as the oxidative stress. And then when I saw that little note, I just didn't know which way to go. So, okay. Well, that helps. Thank you so much.
Yeah, if I can weigh in just for a moment, red light therapy, if we take it outside of the context of sort of cautious conversation about, is this the best for your particular genetics? If we look at red light therapy and sauna for that matter, right? So red light therapy to me is kind of like a low level sauna, right? That exposure to those waves basically stimulate mitochondrial activity, right? So in general, there's very little sort of drawback unless you're doing it over kind of an active tumor, because that can stimulate angiogenesis and things like that. So I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily worry about whether that would be good or not for, serotonin transport or whether it would be impactful for BDNF. I would say particularly full body red light in most cases is going to be helpful. Now whether you want to drop money on one, I kind of look at, of the things that you could do, does that give you your highest value?
Right. I have a small one, but I sort of am hesitant. It's like a belt size from Jonathan Otto. It's a good quality one.
Yeah.
And I've always been tempted to put it on the breast for protection. But then I'm thinking, gosh, I've had 4 tumors before. Probably not a good idea. So I didn't know if it would help or hurt, or with the
Yeah,
DNA not clearing out,
Yeah, it's not so much the DNA not clearing out, because so it's kind of like the things that you would do to prevent a cancer is not always the exact same thing you would do if you had an active cancer. I'm going to use breast cancer as an example. I'm just going to use this as a nutritional example, and then I'll back it up to the red light in particular. So, for instance, some of the best research on breast cancer and diet is what they call a low methionine diet, which is a vegan diet.
Yeah.
And it's because of the lack of ability to methylate, or not methylate, but convert methionine and use it, right? The tumor cell loses the capacity to utilize methionine properly. But I wouldn't necessarily say that's always the best diet for just general health, because we have, muscle loss and all these other things that animal protein may be beneficial for. So red light therapy would be helpful in tissues because it does help to some degree a little bit with kind of cells mobilizing things out of the membrane. But if you had like a tumor that's in there, could it stimulate more angiogenesis? And we don't know, right? Which is kind of why they'll say don't use the beamer mat or red light therapy or things like that on an active tumor.
Okay, that really helps. And also, but I know other people have questions. I could ask you like 50, but I won't. But I will say that my husband, when he got diagnosed with cancer, he had a 2-inch tumor, and he felt led during COVID, like, because he couldn't do anything before surgery for 6 weeks. And he went vegan just because he felt like he should go vegan. And his tumor shrunk in half in 6 weeks.
Yep.
And he's not vegan anymore, but I mean, he had his surgery, got it out, and he's doing well. He's 4.5 years cancer free. But when people say, "Oh, food doesn't matter," I'm like, "Oh, yeah, it does."
Yeah,
So,
it does. Yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Sure.
So I'm not sure if Margaret wants to come on or if she wants me to read it. So Margaret, if you want to come on, go ahead and come on. Otherwise, I will read your question.
I can. Can you hear me? Hi. I don't have my DNA testing though, so. But my question was, I'm wondering if you guys have knowledge of PMDD and whether genetic testing would be helpful for identifying or confirming that one has PMDD, and then also how best to try to resolve PMDD.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So for anybody listening, so PMD is premenstrual what's the word I'm looking for? Premenstrual
dysthymic disorder, right?
Yes.
Dysthymic disorder. Yeah.
Yes, I can't think today. I'm having a menopausal day, I'll just say. Okay, so PMDD. I actually was in the clinical trial that approved Zoloft for that back when I was in my late 20s. Pulled myself out of the trial because it did not work, but I was part of the guinea pig trial for that. And essentially for anybody that's on this call that may not be familiar with it, it is a radical shift in mood, irritability, anxiety, depression related to the change in hormones, specifically around progesterone. And so there's a couple thoughts as to what's really happening. So progesterone, when it's made, it works in the brain and it works on the GABA receptor system. So GABA is kind of your natural anti-anxiety. Think of it as your body's version of a Xanax, right? Your body makes it, kind of calms you down. When progesterone gets metabolized, it gets metabolized into allopregnanolone, and we have GABA receptors in the brain that uses it. And what we believe is happening in PMDD is that receptor activity for the GABA A receptor is dysregulated. And so women that experience this radical mood shift around the latter part of their cycle is not that they're sensitive to progesterone, they are sensitive to the radical rise and decline of it. And so it's sort of a moving target. And so it's not so much that progesterone is the problem, it's more so the variability of progesterone tends to be the problem. And their brain is abnormally sensitive to it, is the belief. And I'm sure Dr. Seti Hardcastle, you probably have a bunch that you can add to that as well.
Well, and in terms of how genetics impact that, this is where knowing how quickly you might convert progesterone into testosterone might come into play. Your general detox pathways and things like that, and also, quite frankly, your mood profile. Because I think sometimes these fluctuations, even though it's about the GABA receptors and not about serotonin and dopamine and BDNF, it doesn't mean that they don't have an effect. So how much of an effect something like that has on you can be and how long you remember it can be impacted by these other genes in your profile. So I think that there is benefit, even though this test doesn't per se diagnose that condition. That would be a set of clinical symptoms that someone would diagnose. That knowing your genes can give a window into some of the factors that are contributing to it. Does that make sense?
Yes. Are you talking to me now?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Yes. And so it sounds good. Sounds like knowing more about one's genetic material can help. And one of the concerns I had about doing it is that if I get the test back, but I don't have someone to help interpret that information isn't going to mean a whole lot to me, so
Hey,
yeah.
Dr. Steady, can I hijack your little webinar here for a second? So
Be my
Margaret, here's the deal. I'm the CEO of the DNA company. So when you get your test results, Vanny, put my CEO email in the webinar chat, please. When you get your test results, send me an email and I will make sure that somebody does a red flag review with you to go through the app and to help you read your results so that you can really get the most out of that. And in addition to that, we're adding 6 genes to the test and 6 interpretations. And that's just in November. At the end of the year, we're going to have a huge surprise for our ecosystem. And it automatically will go to your reports. No one has to pay anything extra. Nobody has to buy anything from us. We just want you guys to have as many actionable insights as possible, really to give you the life that you all deserve. So I'll take care of you, Margaret. My email is in the chat. Please feel free to use it.
Okay. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Dr. Steady.
Thank you, fabulous CEO. For those of you who have joined us a little bit late, we are doing a live Q&A where you can raise your hand and ask us questions. And I can't actually see who has their hands raised because of one of my Zoom settings, because I'm not a tech goddess. So we have people who are helping me to know who goes next, and so we will call on you. And for those of you who, after hearing what we're saying, are thinking, I need to get my DNA 360 test ASAP, we are having a little bit of a discount. First of all, we just had a She Summit over the weekend. Dr. Murray spoke in a recorded session, which is still available for you to watch. I spoke in what was then live, but is now a recorded session, which you can also watch. Everybody's are available until midnight on Halloween. So if you don't want to go out, you could just sit home and watch the She Summit, maybe, have a little snack. But the discount code is She Summit, and that we're going to put in the chat as well. So you can get 10% off of the DNA 360 and the Breast 360. And I do encourage you to watch the She Summit. And now, without further ado, who is our next person? I believe we are calling on Joy.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Joy, welcome. Thank you for asking a question. Go right ahead.
Thank you. I hope I can ask a coherent question. I am considering doing bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, and I just would like to know. I have a codominant hormone profile according to my report, and I would just like to know which of the SNPs I should pay a special attention to make sure that BHRT is appropriate for me? I don't know if that's too broad of a question, but
no, I think it's a great question. You know, I always think of the co-dominant world as kind of the best of both worlds, Joy. You know, that you're not leaning one side or the other, you know, at least from a production standpoint. So when you're looking at bioidentical hormone replacement, so for everybody think of your hormones as a key, right? You have an estradiol key, you have a testosterone key, you have a progesterone key. When you replace it with bioidentical, you're going to Home Depot, you're getting a exact duplicate made. So when it goes to click into the lock, your receptor, it works, right? Birth control and other synthetic forms aren't quite the same key, right? They're missing a tong, let's say. So, you know, so when we're looking at bioidentical hormones, I'll tell you from the literature and the research, right? If we look at broad swaths, matter of fact, there was a prospective study that is in the middle of peer review that used 120 million women's records that was released in a conference over the weekend to the Menopause Society. Right. So we're talking massive. There was also a 10 million women study that was released last year looking retrospectively at the safety of hormone replacement therapy, particularly all forms, but including bioidentical forms that we would use today. And resoundingly, hormone replacement therapy in women is protective against the biggies, the bones, the heart, the brains, improves metabolic health, improves all markers of longevity and mortality. Right. So when we look at those broad swaths, hormone replacement therapy, every woman, if you happen to be in this zone, you deserve the right to look at that, right? For you individually. Now, when we get into the genetic pathways, not so much of the hormones themselves, but how your body processes them, the CYP, the cytochrome P450 enzymes, and then your conjugation enzymes, which are the phase 2 enzymes, and those genes. That's where we start to look at how does your body utilize that hormone after you're done with it and get it ready to take to the dumpster. And that's going to be at the very end if you've had your test done in the hormones and body type portion. Where that comes into play is once you're on hormones, we just want to make sure that when you're done with them, they make it all the way to the dumpster outside, right? And the other part of it, and I'll say this, is even if somebody isn't replacing hormones, and let's say they're 55, right? The truth is, you have stuff going through those pathways all day, every day. Herbicides, pesticides, phthalates, fragrances, plasticizers, heaven forbid, the Lycra in our yoga pants and the microplastic, like all that stuff, right? Much of the chemical toxins we have exposure to are hormonal-like in activity. So they look like xenoestrogens, right? So they look like that. So when we look at hormone replacement therapy, really good functional practitioners will take the genetics of that hormone pathway and then look at the urine output of those pathways in action, right? So we can see that in the urine and see, are my genes that I may be predisposed to moving the estrogen detox products, the byproducts, in a way that's less favorable, and then manipulate that with diet and nutrition, right? So what I would suggest, Joy, is do bioidentical hormones, look at your symptoms, then get lab work to see how you get rid of it, and to also make sure that you get to an effective dose. The other thing that often happens in hormone replacement is women get put on hormones and their doctors say, well, if you're not having hot flashes and night sweats, you're fine, right? Dr. Louise Newsom out of England, who is heading up their entire menopause strategy, did a study in her own population and found 50% that were put on the standardized dose that's set aside by their medical system. 50% would be undertreated, 25% would be overtreated. So looking at the genetics and looking at how they move through a urinary test like a Dutch test or a hormone zoomer or the HuMap, there's several companies that do it, tell you how they move. That adds let's say the icing on the cake, because it really tells you what's happening and it tells you your genetics in action. That's where it's really, really valuable.
Yes.
And when you're looking at a report, some of the genes that you would want to pay attention to would be CYP1A1. And so in the report, it will say that the GG is more favorable than the AA. CYP1B1, and it will say that CC is more optimal than GG. And CYP3A4 AA would be preferred over GG. There are other genes that come into play, COMT and, several other things. But if you're looking for where in your report to see what your tendency is, which is different than the actual output, which is what Dr. Murray's talking about with the urine testing, that's going to say, what is your body doing? So your blueprint is your tendency. And then there's the what's actually happening in this moment. And your DNA 360 only has to be done once to tell you your tendencies, whereas you can redo a urine test to see how are your interventions working. Are they still working the same way that they did 5 years ago? These are the kinds of things that the different types of testing are useful for.
Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. I believe that Robin is next. Robin. We still can't hear you, so you may be muted.
Can you hear me now?
Now I can hear you. Hi, Robin. Welcome.
Thank you. How y'all doing? I actually think you just answered, both of you just answered the question. I've also, I have started BHRT, but I think my question was whether the genetic testing can tell me if I just started too late. I don't know. I've never gotten rid of the hot flashes. I've gotten rid of some of the other symptoms, but the hot flashes have never gone away. So I didn't know if genetic testing could help me get the right dose, be where I need to be, or if I just waited too late, or I'm too old now.
So I can answer part of that. So I would say the DNA can't tell you if you like that kind of question, right? It can answer sort of how your body makes, manages, and sort of assembles to get ready for the trash, your hormones. Although what I would say is when we look at laboratory data to figure out, do I have an effective dose, right? Often hot flashes are a sign that I don't have an effective dose of estrogen replacement therapy for me personally, right? Because the variability is wide, right, on what a woman might need. So one of the things you could ask your doctor to do is to have a blood test for your estradiol, and I would say progesterone also, and test both of those. But what you want is that estradiol to be somewhere between 50 and 80 at least. Every once in a while, we'll have a woman that needs it to be a little bit higher to get those hot flashes and night sweats under control. But that's a sign that your estrogen is probably inadequate, because estrogen controls the thermostat, the hypothalamus in the brain. And when it's not adequate, you won't get control of those. And a lot of times the first dose that a doctor puts you on is not the dose you stay on. It's just the first one.
Okay, thank you. That was helpful.
Sure, you're welcome.
Thank you, Taylor. Oh no, sorry, Robin. Now, Taylor. I was getting ahead of myself, thanking the next person who hasn't even asked their question yet. All right, so thank you, Robin. Taylor, you're next, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
Hi. So, I'm just recently got my DNA profile back, and I'm estrogen balanced, which I'm reading. It doesn't sound optimal for what I'm trying to do. So my question is it says that I have a harder time putting on and keeping on lean muscle mass. And I have been lifting heavy in the gym for a year solid, eating super clean, cheat day, whatever. And I literally cannot see muscle mass. And so reading this, I'm like, well, okay, that's why. But how do I counteract that? Like, what do I need to do to be able to see that?
Sure. You want to start, Dr. Steady Hardcastle, or would you like me?
Go right ahead.
Okay. So generally speaking, as women, we don't show muscle mass as well as men. So Taylor, I want you to I want you to kind of know that too. However, when we have estrogen balance or estrogen dominant, we tend to have a harder time showing that muscle definition. Now, when we look at that, there's two things. First and foremost, androgens like testosterone, relative to that, in most women, whether when we're 20 years old, that's about our peak testosterone level, and then it declines pretty steadily all our life, right? Whereas estrogen kind of does this and then does a bungee cord jump and just keeps going, right? Just off the cliff. So a lot of times by the time we're in kind of midlife, our testosterone is quite low. And so testosterone replacement therapy, getting it to a physiological level, not crazy high, we're not, trying to be a guy, but a physiological level can help a little bit with that. And then the next kind of side of it too is definition that we might see, particularly like arms and things like that. Some of it is genetically determined, like where we carry stuff. Like I bodybuild way back in the day, and I was super mad because I always had a pooch on my belly. And I had what I called the potato farmer Irish arms. Unless I was hardcore, like flexing, you couldn't see them despite being really strong, but my legs looked like a guy's, right? I was like, what is that? And some of that is just fat distribution, right? Hormonally and all that other stuff. And so the other part is where we carry that body fat will kind of determine that. So sometimes we might show it a little better than others. And tell me this is on your hormone DNA report. Are you somebody that is recommended for strength training? Are your genes more your muscle power genes?
Yeah, it says like 65% lifting weights and like not to max out on, too many reps. And then the other 30% or 25% is cardio. So yeah. And it just recommended 3 days. And I typically do more than that. So I was like, well, am I doing too much? Or I don't know. And I am on hormone replacement therapy. So you talking about testosterone, do I need to look at having the doctor up the testosterone portion of that?
Potentially, it depends. Like if they're not checking labs, my team is a big proponent and I'm a proponent. I don't prescribe, I'm a PhD, but I'm a proponent of making sure that we're in these therapeutic researched zones. Right? Not just using symptoms. So we want to make sure that they're there, just to make sure that you're actually, because testosterone, particularly in a cream, is not always well absorbed, right? The bases and things like that. So sometimes the form that you're taking may or may not be the right form for you. You might be taking it, maybe not be getting the kind of dose that you really want. The other thing that I have found, and Dr. Steady Hardcastle, I know you spend a lot more time with the DNA and specifically around the exercise component probably, but also adding HIIT, some like short duration, high intensity interval can also, as long as you don't do too much of that either.
Okay.
And I'm always a fan, everybody, of some long-term zone 2.
Yeah.
Mostly for the longevity aspects, but it can help do that,
Gotcha. Thank you.
What would you say?
I was going to say that something else that might be helpful is when you're getting testing done, testing SHBG and what's free testosterone versus, because if it's bound, some people genetically or otherwise make SHBG is sex hormone binding globulin. And so if it's binding to a lot of the testosterone, your tissue can't really use it. It's just kind of swimming around in the blood. And what I picture is like one of those tubes going down the river, and the SHBG is just like collecting the testosterone, and it's hanging out there. So that would be worth testing.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, my analogy for that is your hormones have a taxi cab that drive them around. And sex HBG is the cab. And it's like being in New York with an SHBG taxi cab that won't let you out of the cab. Like you're there, but you can't go to Times Square. It won't let you out. Right?
Funny.
I like
Awesome.
that one.
Thanks, ladies.
You're very, very welcome.
Sure.
Okay. Next we have Shalina.
Hi there. How are you today?
Well, how are you? Welcome.
Thank you. I was on your call yesterday. and I'm on as many as I can possibly be on. So thank you for doing them. I had all my testing done back in, I think, June. I went through the 5 pillars and had a lot of questions coming out of it, and finding a lot of resolutions. But yesterday you mentioned I'm struggling with my hormones a lot. Mine are more of the depression, can't sleep, low libido kind of thing. And then you said something, and I'm in school. I'm a holistic healthcare practitioner, and I have access to a lot of the scientific studies and things. And you had mentioned yesterday that recently a study came out that showed that estrogen affects trachea and breathing. And it perked up, and I couldn't find it. So I was wondering if perhaps you have a little direction so I can find it, because about a year ago to this month, I just can't breathe at night. My saturation's dropping into the low 80s, and they got me on supplemental oxygen, and I'm 53 years old. So I'm just barely going into this. I'm on BHRT patch, which my estradiol, the last time I tested, was only 26. So I know I'm trying to get a hold of her to kind of get it tested again, get that raised. But I'm really interested in reading that study.
I think I said it was progesterone with the throat, but let me just find, and the estrogen, it was the I mean, they probably both impact things to a degree. Let me find this because I always keep notes of the studies that I um find particularly interesting. So I can search for that while we go on to whoever is next, and then I will come back to that because I did base it on a study. So
Right. And I'm
I,
taking
I
both.
wasn't I
So
wasn't just I wasn't just making it up.
Oh, no worries, no worries. I'm taking both. So I have the patch because we were kind of removed again. So we started to looking through the genes, and they always say, I don't know anything about genes. So I spend a lot of time on my master sheet, a lot of time researching, a lot of time reading, a lot of time in research papers, looking at what's going to help and what's not going to help. Because I'm working with, what you guys are what you're saying with all my reports, et cetera. And, so I do think that we have a little bit of an imbalance, but I appreciate you looking for that study.
Absolutely.
I just put it in the chat. Yeah, it basically, the loss of progesterone affects the smooth muscle. Is that the one you were talking about yesterday? The smooth muscle activity of the airway?
Yes, I can't breathe.
Yeah, and women are affected by airway constriction at a much lower level than men. So we can go from basically a big straw to a cocktail straw with very little change. And so we have a much greater risk for sleep apnea and upper airway resistance just by being menopausal or in that transition period.
Oh, isn't that just lovely? Yeah, I carry around
look
oxygen
back
with
at
me,
videos and you can find me with braces on. Matter of fact, when I met everybody at DNA Co, I had braces on so that I had palate expansion because of airway.
So on that being said, the doctor has one of my airway doctor, because again, we're trying to figure out what this is, and of course it's idiopathic, which we won't even get into that word. Exactly, my response as well is they're talking about epigenetic restructuring of my jaw, where it's not necessarily braces, but they're using metal to reform the mandible to bring your jaw back into alignment. I'm allergic to metal, so we're running into a little bit of a challenge, but is that something that's worth considering?
There's, like I said, I've got intimate knowledge because I went through 4 years of it. So the AGA device, which is a metal device that allows regrowing of the jawline, right? The jawline structure.
Right.
There are removable devices now. I think one of the company's names is called Vivos. I'll look while I'm talking. They do have some metal in it to structure it, but it's kind of like, if you remember the old school retainers, you can take it out. But what it does do is it causes palate expansion, because if they can pull the jawline forward, right, and then broaden the airway, it pulls the jawline forward this way. There's also mouth, like bite guards.
But yeah, I have those. I had those made earlier in the year.
They don't work as well.
Well, the one that we had was all plastic, and it's a retainer, but it has like a hook, so it has no metal, so it doesn't have any of the metal spring components. It literally pulls my jaw forward about 1 millimeter forward, my bottom jaw, which really does help me not snore, but doesn't help anything as far as saturation. It just keeps my airway clear, but it doesn't help with the lower trachea into the into the lower part of the upper part of the respiratory system, where I am now struggling to breathe, or I'm walking around the house and can't breathe. But those things that move the jaw forward were great. They do hurt, they pull your muscles back, and of course it affects your spine because it's all connected together, is that cervical spine. But the jaw expander, where this one they're looking at the mandible expander, where it actually goes underneath your
Ah.
tongue and expands, and again you put pressure on the bone, of course it's going to start remodeling.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to look into some of those as well, because I'd consider doing that, but as far as I'm 53 years old, so it's a lot to take. That's just not fun. But if it'll help me breathe, help me breathe. But if we can also start looking, and Dr. Steady Hardcastle, from your reading on this, and if you had any insight onto whether or not you get that estrogen progesterone balanced, if it can help with the soft tissue and the tracheal collapse. Have you guys noticed that as well, Dr. Murray?
I've seen it help. What about you, Dr. Hardcastle?
I was going to say help and help with not progressing more. You know what I mean? It may not reverse it back to, when you were 25, because as we know,
Sure.
nothing is going to do that.
Come on.
But it can help, I think. Dr. Murray?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it can particularly reduce the likelihood of continued activity. I haven't necessarily seen it necessarily take somebody back to where the airway was normalized. I'm going to air quote that. But I've had lots of people go through even myofascial activity, like working with a myofascial therapist that can help. Sometimes even doing some of those exercises can help, because the tongue placement makes a difference. All those things make a difference. Like I went through it, and the Vivos wasn't really out yet. And so I went through 4 years of palate expansion, braces, all of it. And so, I mean, it made a radical difference in my world, but it is a lot. And I did that at 50. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. They put me on an APAP machine, which I feel like I'm suffocating because it just shoves air. And as soon as the tongue falls in, now that air comes in my mouth, it blows up my cheeks, and it comes out the side. So I'm just horribly irritated. Myofascial therapist. Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Oh, one other thing, I have my hydrogen machine on its way. One of these days I'll get here. Have you had any experience with the molecular hydrogen helping with the breathing, or is this more of a soft tissue challenge?
I mean, I have a lot of people that use molecular hydrogen. I use it. I have a device. I haven't necessarily seen it make a difference in the airway.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Well, ladies, thank you again for always showing up. I really enjoy listening to you, and thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. And I'm just going to throw out one more little thing, which was I had a sleep doctor once tell me that playing the didgeridoo well, which I never pulled off, can help strengthen the airway. And this was a sleep doctor, so I was not able to get it to work for myself because I wasn't good at it and it was loud, which no one in my house appreciated. But I felt like I had to throw it out there in case someone out there has a didgeridoo lying around and they feel like they want to give it a try. I would love to hear whether or not it works for you. So just throwing that out there.
I'm wondering if something like that's a vocal challenge like that, like if you think of like yodeling, right? That's because it's a vocalization that happens mostly in the throat, right?
Yeah.
Whether those things might help, because it's a loss of tone, right? It's a loss of muscle tone, and it goes from like being circular like this, and it goes, or it becomes like a pinhole, right? And so anything you can do to create more tone, I would think would help it.
Right. So I think that's
the jaw
the same. Yeah, the same theory, right? So,
yes.
All right. So we have a question. Is the breast 360 appropriate for someone who has already had breast cancer in the past? And the answer is that the test has not been validated for people who have had breast cancer in the past. That doesn't mean that you couldn't take it. But what we don't know is if anything from that past diagnosis is going to affect the results of it. They are doing research about that actively. And so we will have more information for you about that as things progress. So thank you for that question. And now we have a question from Wendy, who is 55 years old, has had a drastic drop in all hormones this past year. Up until this year, she was high energy. The depression, lack of energy, and sleeplessness have had their way with me. I've been working with a PA trying to dial my hormones back into alignment. What would be your recommendations for optimal hormone ranges, Dr. Murray?
So, it's a combination of things. I'm gonna use blood. So I'll give a little bit of background. Most of the research that has been done on optimizing hormones, whether it's for osteoporosis risk and dementia, those kind of things, they do laboratory testing when they're looking at it in blood. There's a couple reasons. It's standardized, it's commonly used, easy to access. Now, blood levels of hormones don't let you know how many are in the cab and how many are out of the cab. So if you remember that conversation, it's only the ones that are out of the cab that can help, right? So it's not always the best test to go, is this perfect? But it's what I consider the quick and dirty, fast way to understand, am I therapeutic, right? So when you're looking at blood and you're looking at estradiol levels, we'll start there. The zone where we know we start to get bone protection and therefore heart and brain protection is between that like 50 and 80 range on an estradiol level on blood work. Now, testosterone, it depends on the lab, that varies because we don't have standardization for women, but most clinicians when they're treating will usually get you into the like 40 to 80 range. Some people feel better a little bit higher than that, but generally we know that we're in therapeutic range then. Free testosterone levels will vary based on the lab, but most of the time you want those to be like between 2 and 4. Some labs have wider ranges, but for the most part, that's it. Progesterone, if you're sleeping well, progesterone at a bare minimum must be 10% of what your estradiol was. So if your estradiol is at 80, we need a progesterone of about 8. If there's sleep issues, some people may double and or even go higher than that, right? Their progesterone levels may be higher than that. You must have both if you have a uterus, because progesterone keeps estrogen from providing blood supply and tissue proliferation in the uterus. So those are the standardized doses, right? Where we know we're in ballpark. We always use those relative to how do I feel? What is my hot flashing? Am I night sweating? Am I insomnia? Am I feeling bad? Sleeplessness, those are all signs like that. Low energy, all of those are signs that you are probably not optimal yet, right? If hormone replacement therapy is not quite ideal, right? That would be the first place to look, because those are the most, if we look at the top like 10, fatigue, mood, depression, anxiety, low energy, right? Brain fog, weight gain, insomnia, right? Hot flashes and night sweats are there, but they're not the top. And so that's what I would look at. So I would look at those ranges in blood work first. Then when your symptoms are better and you feel pretty good and your blood levels are good, then I would turn around and do take my DNA 360, doing the urinary hormone metabolites and check how I get rid of them. Yeah. The hardest thing with hormone replacement therapy is it's a bit of a guessing game. We have 20-year gap in studying hormone replacement therapy in women because of the Women's Health Initiative. So we generally start at a level and then we do this adjusting. And most practitioners will say, if you feel fine and you don't have a hot flash, then you're fine, right? We go a little further, but we don't have good science to go, this constellation of symptoms and laboratory values end up being this dose every time. We don't have that yet. That's what I'm building. So we're trying to build, ladies and men. That's what we're trying to build.
Nice.
Yeah.
I can't wait for that. Thank you very much.
Me too.
So, we have a question about like what the the terminology around balance means. Is there an implication if someone has overall balanced versus estrogen balanced in the reports? And I know that the language can be a little bit confusing. So maybe we can just kind of talk about what makes something balanced in the report. So it's sort of like the production versus the clearance, and how that happens and whether it happens, as opposed to having a report or a profile where there's a lot more on the production side than there is on the clearance, or vice versa.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel the urge to bring mine up again, as usual. I'm like, we could just know what bad is, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, because, I might use slightly different terminology. So on the production side, from pregnenolone down to progesterone, across to testosterone, to estrogen and or progesterone, right? If your estrogen balanced right there, so meaning your production is adequate, it doesn't lean towards androgens, and you're not estrogen dominant like me, right? So that means your production is within the expected normative ranges of what the research shows today, right? Based on the genetic combination. And then when you look at that, like if you're looking at your DNA 360 and you look at your CYP enzymes, right? So all of those enzymes that move what we call phase 1 liver detoxification, and that's going to be your 4-hydroxy, your 2-hydroxy, and your 16-alpha hydroxy estrone, right? So that's where your body takes that toxin in and tries to make it water soluble, right? That if you have a dominance in slow processing, right? Slow clearance processing, you can end up estrogen toxic, right? Like, so more level of toxicity because the clearance, so your ability to get it like to the dumpster is impaired, right? So think of it as, here's my analogy, and I think I may have used it in the one that I recorded, is anytime your body's clearing stuff out, it's like it's taking stuff out of the attic, right? We're going to clean out the house, we're going to clean out the attic. And that's that very first step, right? And then it's going to say, okay, I'm going to clean out the closets too. And I'm going to get all that stuff in the living room. And that's phase 1. Phase 2 says, okay, I'm going to get it to the garage, right? And if I can't get it to the garage because the garage door is locked, because my clearance is locked, I'm going to be overall dominant. So I won't just be, my estrogen production could still be balanced, but I could be more, am I saying that right from the results on the labs? That could be estrogen production balance, but I might be estrogen toxic on clearance or lean that way, right?
Yep.
And then the last stage is, can I get the garage door up and get it all the way to the dumpster, right? And if those two clearance parts don't work well, I genetically don't do that very well without support, then what you have is an inability to get the trash out, right? And so that starts to impact whether that balanced production is truly balanced or not.
Yeah, perfect. So our next question is a question about HRT and hormones. What if you don't have a uterus? And I'm just going to say something really fast because then I think you're going to go off, girl, and that's great. Which is that your uterus is not the only place that you have. So I'm going to back up. I think the reason this question is being asked is because we're saying you should not take estrogen without progesterone if you have a uterus, because the progesterone needs to protect the uterus. Even if you don't have a uterus, that's not the only place where there are receptors for progesterone in the body. So I said this last night, the nervous system, just the brain, which is part of the nervous system, but everywhere there are still the throat, right? All of these progesterone receptors. So it's sort of like saying, if I put enough lotion on my arm, does that mean that I don't need to put it on the rest of my body? You know what I mean?
That's a great analogy. Yeah.
So you don't have to, I guess, unless you want to have dry skin. So that's my analogy.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Be ashy on one side, right?
Right.
Yeah. So we have to remember that all of our medical system, the conventional medical system, or the Western medical system, is based on this idea that there's a symptom and I need to get rid of it, right? It's this 1-for-1 relationship. And so when they looked at hormone replacement therapy, they were like, wow, hot flashes are caused by the loss of estrogen. And they gave estrogen. And then they figured out, wow, if we don't have progesterone and somebody has a uterus, we cause hyperplasia and they get uterine cancer because estrogen's job is to bring in blood supply and support growth there. So the answer to that was, oh, you don't need it unless you have a uterus, right? And they never bothered to really think about it. But we have tons of research, like we said, the receptors everywhere. And so the reality is you need both, even if you don't have a uterus. But if you are on estrogen and you have a uterus, you must have it, or you will potentially cause hyperplasia. And it's unlikely that you wouldn't, because that's its job. And so, and you have to make sure that they're balanced with each other. That's why we're into testing. We're like, we need to know that those two hormones are in alignment.
Yep. And we have now a question from Luciana. I have COMT GG. I'm just making sure my glasses were reading that right. It's 7 o'clock where I am. Should I take more estrogen than other menopausal women? And I'm going to give you a definite maybe on that one, because that's not the only gene that's involved. It does mean that you're going to potentially break things down more quickly than other people, but it also depends on what happens before COMT. You might do some other things more slowly. So, Dr. Murray, do you have anything to add?
I would agree. So in case anybody that's listening, COMT has two major jobs. It's so the GG is associated with high frequency. So I'm going to give a visual for anybody that's like, what are they talking about? So think of it as, if you're looking at a toilet, the water tank fills up, and COMT is the one that flushes the tank, right? So people that are GG, that's a 3-year-old standing in front of the tank and it's just all day long, fast as possible, can't even refill, right? So you're clearing your dopamine, you're clearing your estrogen more quickly, right? But that depends on how much gets presented to COMT, and those CYP enzymes sit above it, right? So that determines how much ends up there. So you have a shorter half-life or life of like dopamine and estrogen, but it's not necessarily a guarantee.
Perfect. So when we were talking a little bit before the webinar, Dr. Murray, so every time I co-host a webinar with Dr. Murray, I learn another little tidbit about all the cool stuff she's done in her life. And we were talking about the estrobolome and the gut hormone connection. And, there was even just a recent study about when estrogen drops, your gut ecosystem completely shifts, and there can be fewer beneficial microbes and more inflammation can occur. And it's talking, basically the gut is this other factor that we have to take into consideration, and that, there are genes like FUT2 that directly affect microbiome diversity. But then I was talking about this with Dr. Murray, and she said, I did a whole bunch of research on these.
That was literally my dissertation.
So since we have you here, can you talk to us about that? I'm so excited to hear this.
Yeah. So for everybody, my dissertation, so my entire PhD research was looking at hormone metabolism. So how your body as a female processes hormones. When they get to the gut, what does the microbiome do it? And what's the impact on the intestines and how we clear estrogen in particular? But of course, I was in there looking at progesterone and your neurotransmitters like serotonin and GABA and dopamine, and they all interact. Right. So the estrobolome, for everybody, is our bacteria. So let me back up, make sure we're all clear. So we have a ton of bacteria, yeast, fungus in our gut, right? And little viruses that are called phages that attack other bacteria. So we have this ecosystem. So think of it as a jungle. I have a bunch of animals. I need a bunch of variety and a bunch of all of them. So the more diverse and more rich all those species are, the healthier we are. When we're babies, we have a very distinct combination of microbiome. If we are breastfed, if we are vaginal delivered, right? So that, and then as we get older, children's diversity changes again. So it looks very different when we're infants, and it looks different if you were bottle and not vaginal delivered. And then as adults, it starts to stabilize to some degree, right? And it stays that way. But as we lose estrogen in menopause, we have a group of bacteria called the estrobolome. And this group of bacteria produce an enzyme called beta-glucuronidase. And beta-glucuronidase has the capacity to take estrogen that has gone from the attic to the garage to the dumpster in the stool, which is where estradiol goes predominantly. And we've got it in the stool now. It goes out through the gallbladder and the liver, gets bound to fiber in the diet and in the bile, and then gets slated to go out. When it's in there and you've got a bunch of bacteria producing this enzyme, what it does is it removes, let's call it the black wrapper, from the estrogen and allows it to get recirculated through the liver back into the bloodstream, right? This isn't an estradiol anymore. It's some funky version of that, right? But that little funky version can go run around and hit those receptors and try and turn things on. When we go through menopause, the distribution of estrobolome bacteria increases, right? So we see this growth of those bacteria automatically, right? It's magic. It's magic. And then we see a change of some of the other probiotics that are helpful. They start to decline. We see more inflammatory activity in the microbiome, but the estrobolome increases, and we believe it increases because it's trying to work in concert with our body to provide more estrogen-like compounds, because estrogen is important to every single cell in the body except for two. And so a lot of times we see a lot of these changes. So if I've got gut stuff, right, if I'm constipated, diarrhea, bloating, gas, all that stuff, that could be a sign that there's something going on in there. And if I'm also a woman and I'm experiencing a bunch of other symptoms, right, that are hormonal related, my gut is likely involved, including IBS. Right. In my study, we found IBS constipation had a higher concentration of beta-glucuronidase than those who did not. Right. We need bigger studies and better studies, because we didn't have hormone metabolites and all of that at the same time, because there was no funding for that. But we know that there's a role. So the microbes are very involved. Right. And more and more, they make GABA, they break down GABA, they do all kinds of stuff.
And isn't it also the case that we can kind of make some forms of estrogen from some of our fat cells also?
Absolutely.
That's also a way that the body might try to help regulate things during that transition, Dr. Murray?
Yep. Yeah. So we make another form of estrogen called estrone. So estrone can be interconverted into estradiol. And particularly, it can be active and interconverted inside tissue, breast, uterine, all kinds of tissues, right? So estrone acts as kind of a holding tank to allow for estradiol production, but it has its own estrogenic effect, and it's considered inflammatory, right, when it's high relative to estradiol. Our estrone is made through the aromatase enzyme CYP19, and it's aromatized from testosterone. So most women, at least on average, 80% of women will experience some weight gain or weight distribution changes during menopause, an average of 15% increase in body fat, right? So that for a 150-pound woman, that's easily 20 pounds, right? And so some of that is believed to be that body putting on body fat, going, okay, we don't have any estrogen, let's go ahead and make some more body fat so we have this reservoir, because again, estrogen is really important to the body. And so our fat cells can do that as well.
So do you see that women, when they start bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, that some of these mechanisms may kind of slow down a little bit, and some of that weight might start to come off if they're still doing all of the lifestyle things because their body isn't kind of freaking out anymore?
Yeah, I mean, because there are people marketing online, like, take estrogen, your hormones, and then your hormones are balanced, then your weight comes off. It's like, it doesn't quite work that way. But what it does do is at least stabilize, because there's a lot of other mechanisms, like at the powerhouse, the mitochondria, and your ability for your adrenal hormones and things like epinephrine at those receptors working. But it does seem to stabilize that, and it makes the other efforts. Often we have to change some of the diet and lifestyle things we used to do. And a lot of it is we can't get away with what we got away with before if we were successful before. But it does help, right? Because there is a big metabolic effect of the loss of estrogen, testosterone, and even progesterone.
And I just want to put it out there that going back to the microbiome, you don't have to wonder if something is going on anymore, there is testing. Our Gut 360 is a great test, and it definitely tests to see whether or not you have too much beta glucuronidase in your stool, so that things can be done. And I also just want to point out, you said a word when you were talking about the microbiome, and it's the other F word that we love so much, and it's fiber. So can you talk to me?
I was like, oh, Tracy's on here. I didn't do it, did I?
The other F word.
The other F word, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so fiber. I love fiber. Right? And the American population do not get, look at my camera. My camera's like, I'm just going to zoom in. I love, like, it's doing it.
That's how important this is.
It's
like
how important. Okay,
in.
it's like zooming in on it, right? Like, this is so funny. I didn't know Zoom was doing that. Okay. So fiber, number one, binds to toxins, right? Fiber in your diet will lower your cholesterol levels because it will reduce the amount of cholesterol you absorb from your gut. Fiber binds to estrogen and binds to your toxins and helps you get it out. What's interesting is, I don't know if you've done a deep dive here, Dr. Steady Hardcastle, but there's some studies like dietary fiber encapsulated in your food, the vegetables, the fruits, the nuts, the seeds, legumes, if you eat them, right? Because they're a great source of soluble fiber. Whole grains, if you're a grain eater, don't fall for that on the box. If it says it on the box, it's a lie. Ignore it and just keep moving on. When you have the food encapsulated, right? So like in a plant, it's encapsulated in its cellulose capsule, right? The fiber, what it does is it holds on to the carbohydrate, the simple sugar component of that carbohydrate, and pulls that out of your down your digestive tract, all the way to your microbes. And they say, awesome, I break down the fiber around it and I get that, right? So when I get adequate fiber, it also reduces the impact of the carbohydrate content because you can't absorb all of it. So it reduces the glucose load of your food. Taking dietary, like supplemental fiber with your meal and then saying, I'm not eating the vegetables, doesn't work the same way. I wish it did. Believe me, I'd be like popping pills. It'd make my life easier, wouldn't it? Yeah, if I could just do greens powder and pop in a bunch of fiber, that'd be great, but it doesn't work that way, right? So you have to eat them to get the true benefit, but you can add additional psyllium husk, inulin, arabinogalactan, all kinds of different apple pectin, modified citrus pectin. You can add all those different fibers and they're helpful, but the fiber itself will radically change that. And you have to go slow, otherwise you'll get gassy, right? And some people, if they have major digestive upset, that may be something questionable and you need to work on that first, but fiber is always a yes.
Thank you very much. I knew that's how you felt, but I really wanted to, I love your stories. Okay. We have a couple more questions. I needed to get those bits of wisdom from Dr. Murray before we finished with our questions.
Yeah.
From Joy, we have, when I had my hormones tested for the purpose of going on BHRT, I had thyroid antibodies and my TSH was slightly elevated. I have had several symptoms of hypothyroidism for at least 15 years, but this is the first time it has shown up on lab work. Should I address the thyroid issue first before starting on BHRT?
I would say do both at the same time. You don't have to earn your BHRT, right? So you don't have to like fix your other stuff first or get your diet. People they have to earn their hormones. I'm like, I need my hormones so I can do the other stuff, right? So you could do hormones because they're interrelated, but they're not exclusive to each other. And often people have thyroid antibodies and they don't know it until the destruction of the thyroid is such that the brain figures it out and TSH climbs. So there's a lot of things that you can do to help reduce those antibodies. And then if you do need thyroid replacement, this might be the time to think about it along with your hormones.
So we have two very similar questions going with slightly different details. So I'm going to kind of combine them into one question for you to ask, which is, we have two people in their 70s wondering if, and you're going to know what's coming, is it too late for them to start BHRT? One's been in menopause for about 13 years. The other one had taken hormones, but stopped at age 52. And one is wondering about bone strength and one is wondering about cardiac help. So have at it. Those are our, it's so interesting how they both came in at the same time and had such a similar
Awesome.
question. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to bring up something while I'm talking, because I want to put this in the
chat.
Chat
She wants to
box.
put it in the chat.
I've been running my mouth for 9 hours straight today. It's finally catching up. My speed of my brain and my mouth are no longer in sync. Okay, so every woman, regardless of age, even if you're 82, deserves the right to examine hormone replacement for you, regardless, right? So without kind of belaboring it, so hormone replacement therapy is optimized when it's done closer to the menopause transition. And I'm going to give a big caveat to that, particularly when we're looking at cognition, right? So the brain remodels, it shrinks, we lose white matter, and then the highways that go to the prefrontal cortex pop loose, and they eventually reroute themselves to creative centers in the brain. Dr. Mosconi's group out of the Cornell Center did all that research. They captured the same woman's brain as it goes through this process, not just one, but many, many women. And they saw this happening. And what they also saw was that if a woman started hormone replacement before that complete remodeling about a decade later happened, if she replaced, it sort of stopped it, right? And we know that women have a much greater risk for dementia and Alzheimer's relative to men. As a matter of fact, I think the current stats are 3 out of every 4 Alzheimer's patients are female. Some of it is, yes, we do live longer, but some of it is that loss of hormone. Now, when we look at bone health, right? Bone health, regardless of age, estrogen therapy helps restore bone and is the only drug to date that has ever shown that it actually reduces fracture risk. Doesn't only just make it better, right, denser on a DEXA, because doctors are like, ooh, we made it denser, but the fracture risk doesn't always change, right? And that's the only meaningful measure, is I'm at risk for fracture. Estrogen therapy was approved in 1988 for the treatment and prevention of osteoporosis. It was taken off as a recommendation after the Women's Health Initiative, which is a whole nother story. So we have studies that were the approval studies for the patch. You know what they used to approve that it worked as well as Premarin? DEXA scans. And we showed in older women that low doses of topical estradiol would improve bone mineral density. Full stop. So from an osteoporosis risk, absolutely, that should be on the docket, right? And I would say along with progesterone. Now, there's a study I'm going to put in the chat here. This is a study that everybody that's, in that age group that might be considering hormones, it's a 10 million woman study that came in. Where is my chat window? Where'd you go? Oh, there you are. Okay. And 10 million women study looking at mortality risk and with hormones, without hormones, and did hormones for a short period of time and stopped. And what they found is the women that were on hormones and stayed on hormones had a reduced risk from all-cause mortality. Why this is important is this was a Medicare study. So it means everybody in it was over 65, right? So they 65 and above, right? 10 million women. Now, the important part of the study is this was the first big study that looked at oral Premarin, which we would never do. So if somebody tries to give that to you, you karate chop them and run away. We don't take Premarin ever, right? We don't need that. We have bioidentical forms that are topical, go on the body, right? And they absorb through the skin. They go to your body first, then they go to the liver, right? If you take Premarin or oral estrogen, it goes to the liver, goes processing through your DNA pathways and makes a bunch of byproduct. We don't want that, right? Because it's the byproducts, particularly of Premarin, that increase clotting risk, and especially if there's synthetic progestins, increase clotting risk, which increases cardiovascular risk in older women, right? So if I were in my 70s, Premarin and Prem-Pro are a no. And I would say they're a no for everybody, but they're absolutely a no. But in this study, this was the first one where they had enough data to really look, and they said all of the cardiovascular risks with stroke and heart attack associated with clotting were completely mitigated, i.e. were not present with a topical form of estrogen, right? Topical form. And so that whole thing of, oh, you can't take it because estrogen is going to cause blood clots isn't like that when you use a topical form. And if I'm looking at my risk for fall and fracture risk, estrogen absolutely is great. Now, if I'm worried about cognition, if I'm in my 70s, my brain may have already remodeled. But that doesn't mean that my lifestyle, like exercise, diet, dancing, all these other things that mitigate some of those dementia risks wouldn't have an effect. We have women in our practice that we have put on hormones in their 60s that are in their 80s and they're still rocking and rolling. Yeah, still rocking and rolling.
So I think I know what you're going to say to this question, but is there a maximum number of years that someone can stay on BHRT?
Till the day you're in the ground. Like I have a woman who's 83. We put her on it, and we put her on it when she was like 63, 64. So she's literally 20 years, right? Like one of my first patients in my physical clinic in Dallas. And she came in and she was like, please don't take it away from me. Why would I? She's like, all my friends are dropping like flies. I'm still playing tennis. I'm like, I would never take it away from you. Why wouldn't I do it? Because she's like, this is why I'm here. I know I am, right? And she has a great lifestyle, right? There's really no indication to ever stop it. If you're feeling fine, you know, everything's working well. And if we look at our risks for aging, there's the big three: fall risk, fracture, loss of mobility, and then a potential to die from, you know, things that happen after that. And then heart attack and stroke. Those are the biggest killer of women. 310,000 women died in 2023 of a heart attack or stroke, 380,000 men. We are equal in that game, right? And then the other thing is we're worried about losing our mind, but still being here physically, right? Now, we may have lost some of that ideal window, but that doesn't mean taking hormones will cause it, right? Especially topical. We have clotting risk in Premarin with small capillaries that are already hardening, you know, because they're much later on, but not topical.
So just in closing, I think I just wanted to say that, oh, wait, we've got more questions. Oh boy. Okay. Someone is saying that they're 62 and just found out they have endometrial hyperplasia, and now the doctor refuses to give any HRT. What are your thoughts on that, Dr. Murray?
Yeah, so for everybody, endometrium is the interior lining of the uterus. Hyperplasia is overgrowth, right? A lot of times this can happen if we've got an imbalance between estrogen and progesterone, right? Because estrogen's job is to create growth there, and progesterone's job is to sort of counterbalance it. It would be contraindicated to give estrogen therapy with that because it will continue to grow. In many cases, they can do like a DNC, or depending on what they find, sometimes they even recommend uterine removal. If it's mild, sometimes you can like let it sort of relax and not use hormones for a while and see it calm down. It depends on to what degree it's going on. You know, I don't know if you have anything to add, but it's usually contraindicated to do hormones while it's there, because what'll happen is it'll stimulate it. I mean, you could use really high dose progesterone maybe to sort of back it off, right?
Right. And sometimes they'll use an IUD for that too, but that's synthetic, right? So that's
like a high dose bioidentical, you know, like a higher dose, like a high dose would be 300 to, not making personal recommendations. I don't prescribe.
No.
But like high doses of that can often sort of back it off, because we do that when you get like massive breakthrough bleeding and things like that. So I would get a second opinion and go to somebody that knows how to do hormone replacement. Just because they're a gynecologist doesn't mean they do.
So the person says that they did ask about progesterone, but was told no. So like a second opinion, just to see.
Second opinion would be really good.
See what someone who can actually physically examine you
and talk hormones.
Right. That they can do both of those things, because, you know, we don't know anything else about your health history or anything like that. So we're just giving sort of general.
Yeah, that's usually the MO.
Information. Yeah. Okay. You know, unfortunately, we have to give our closing.
Oh, yes, we do.
Little statements, because it always goes by fast with you, Dr. Murray. Always delightful. The only thing that I want to say is, if you're not feeling well, advocate, find someone who will listen to you. You don't have to be that way. Like life doesn't have to be that way. There are people who will listen to you and respond. So that's my final thing. Dr. Murray, do you have anything you'd like to say in closing?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, medicine's not a dictatorship. They work for you. So if somebody's not willing to listen and be your partner in this, fire them. Just fire them. And the truth is especially if you're dealing with hormones, we have to remember for 20 years, physicians weren't taught about them. They just weren't, right? And so less than 20% of schools even have an hour of training around menopause, right? All of us go through it. It's a third of your life. And even if you're 35 right now, you could be having hormonal symptoms. And so sometimes it requires you to sort of jump around and find that right person for you. And it may be a team. You might have a gynecologist, but you might work with a functional hormone literate practitioner that can help you on the other side.
And don't forget, we have the 10% discount code on the DNA 360 and the Breast 360. And we still have the She Summit up where you can, if you really like listening to us talk, we'll talk some more. And so will a bunch of other awesome people. So that's all live until midnight on the 31st. So go ahead and head over. The link is in the chat. And the discount code is She Summit if you're ready to order your test. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. And Dr. Murray, thank you so much. It's always delightful to have you on the webinars with me.
Thank you for having me.
Good night,
Thank
everyone.
you, everybody. Have a good night.